We'll now speak to Sami Al-Arian, who's a professor of public affairs and director at the Center for Islam and Global Affairs at Istanbul Zaim University, joining us from Istanbul this hour. Thanks so much for your time. Mr. Al-Arian, there's reporting out of the U.S. that suggests that several Trump officials are concerned that the Netanyahu and his administration may abandon the ceasefire deal. We know the vice president of the U.S. heading back to Israel, Witkoff and Kushner already there. To what extent are they there to simply pressure Netanyahu?
Well, it's a real concern for the Americans as well as the whole world that what Netanyahu wants is to find a way. He's been itching to go back to the war, to the genocide, but the Americans are trying to keep him in line. Let's also try to take stock of what's going on here. Right before Trump unveiled his plan on September 23rd, the whole world was talking about the establishment of a Palestinian state. Between September 11th, 12th, and all the way up till September 23rd, everybody was talking about Palestinian state. 80% of the countries of the world have already recognized the Palestinian state. All but 5% of the world, 10 countries actually oppose it. So the whole conversation has been changed with Trump's plan. That's a great deviation tactic to go back now and talk about a genocide. If Netanyahu has his way, obviously it's going to be a huge setback, and then everybody would be talking about the inevitability of a Palestinian state. This whole process, this Trump plan is trying to delay as much as possible the emergence of a Palestinian state.
What expectations, however, do you have about how the ceasefire will progress? Because the expectation is that negotiations are going to have to start at some point regarding phase two.
The problem with phase two is that, according to Hamas's response to Trump, they could actually negotiate the release of the captives. They can negotiate some certain items like how much aid goes in, things of that sort. They already give up all their cards. In other words, whatever leverage they have, which was the living hostages as well as the dead ones, now they have about 15 bodies left. The whole world is talking about 15 bodies, but thousands, probably tens of thousands of Palestinians' bodies have not even been recovered since the genocide started 2 years ago. This just shows the insanity of the world. Heavy equipment needed to do that, but assuming they do return the bodies, then Hamas has lost its leverage. And Hamas says, in the second phase of the negotiations, these decisions about the disarmament, about the entrance of international force, about the day after, all these things have to be decided by the collective Palestinian will, not just a faction or two. And therefore, we're going to have real difficulty in trying to get any kind of disarmament or decommissioning, because Hamas would be totally opposed to it. But more importantly, the negotiating team does not have the mandate to negotiate these items.
So what does this tell us then? Or what does it tell you about how this is going to actually play out on the ground? And what are the likely scenarios then going forward?
We have very risky scenarios right now, in terms of the Israelis. They want to come back and try to have or declare what they call total or absolute victory. I don't think the Americans would allow them. The Americans are trying to get out of this mess by trying to impose some sort of a political settlement that will achieve Israeli objectives through political means rather than military means, what they haven't been able to do. And I think that's going to be really tricky. It's going to be very difficult. It depends on the mediators and how forceful they will be with the Israelis. I believe we have probably seen the end of the genocide, but it's going to be a stalemate. It's going to be a very tense situation. They will be killing Palestinians so far. Over 100 Palestinians have been killed since the announcement of the ceasefire. We're talking about the violations of the Israelis since that came into effect about 10, 11 days ago. They haven't been allowing the aid that they were promised, even though they got all the living captives back. And also, we're going to have real difficulty in trying to rehabilitate or reconstruct Gaza. All that tells us that there are going to be very difficult times ahead.
When you say that the Israelis are going to try to achieve their objectives politically, what are these objectives today, and have they changed from 2 years ago?
A little, but not much. That what the Israelis actually wanted was to ethnically cleanse Gaza, try to destroy Gaza to the point that they can force the Palestinians to leave. That has not been achieved. But now they're trying to also make sure that Gaza is not going to be ruled by any kind of a hostile forces. Hamas has already said it's not going to rule Gaza, but they also want to demilitarize Gaza. And that's not going to happen because the people there do not feel safe in any way, shape, or form. They do remember what happened to the Sabra and Shatila camps back in 1982 when the fighters left and massacres were committed. A few days later, thousands of people were killed. Also, we remember what happened in Srebrenica in 1995 when in Bosnia the people were disarmed and then 8,000 people were massacred by the Serbs in 1995. So all these things, all these examples tell the people that any kind of disarmament would be suicidal. And therefore, what the Israelis want to do is to do through military means what they couldn't have already achieved. But the Americans know that this is going to be a real problem, not just for their objectives in the Middle East, but also for the Israelis' reputation and image throughout the world, which has tanked, basically.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Sami Al-Arian, you're a professor of public affairs and director at the Center for Islam and Global Affairs at Istanbul Zaim University. Thanks for your time and thanks for speaking to us from Istanbul.
Thank you.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.